Hello and welcome, my name is Charlie Roscoe, and I really felt like after what was an absolute disastrous third race of my live stream last night, the last race of the evening where I ran out of fuel at the Butthurst track and just didn't really do a very good job. Tried to get back in the pits, crossed over the grass, it wouldn't let me do it, it would respawn me back on the track. I really kind of felt like I owed you guys another crack at Butthurst so you could actually watch a full race. Now, this one didn't exactly go perfectly, but at the same time it wasn't, well, it was a hell of a lot better than last night's one, so I thought I'd just run you through it as a bit of a blow-by-blow. We'll just talk our way through it as the race goes on. Now, I didn't really have time to do a lot of practice laps and try and improve my time. Still a little bit disappointed, to be honest, with a 2:03. I've done 2:02s in the past. I would have liked to have at least been in the low 2:03s, but anyway, it is what it is. It was good enough to get me third. So as we kick this race off, I took a fairly defensive line through turn one, obviously just being a little bit cautious of the person behind me. I had a little bit of a gap here, so it wasn't too bad. You can take a defensive line, a little bit of action up here in front of me, and this actually causes my first penalty of the race coming up here. So as you can see, pushed out wide there, yeah, however you say his name. So I was on the outside of him, he moved across on me and actually pushed me into the wall a little bit. Not particularly ideal. Now that caused a 1 second penalty to me. He did get a 5 second penalty for that. I don't know if you saw that down the bottom there. He got 5 seconds, I got 1. I'm still not 100% sure I'm that super keen on that idea. I get what Gran Turismo or Polyphony Digital are trying to do. They're trying to actively discourage every person involved in the accident to try and avoid it. And what they did there was go, okay, it wasn't your fault. You were up the outside, you had track position, he moved across on you and pushed you into the wall, which is not ideal. We're going to give him the 5 second penalty because he's the one that sort of did it. But at the same time, they're saying you could have done more to avoid the accident. So we're going to give you a little penalty as well. Now, I don't know about that. On one hand, I kind of agree with it because it's like, well, yes, technically I could have tried to roll out of that, give him the position back and pick a better spot to try and overtake. But at the same time, like if you've ever watched real life racing, you'll know that opportunities like that have to be taken. Yeah, I stuck to the outside, I stayed hard against the wall as I actually overtake him here. I'm not sure if he backed off a little bit. I think I just got a better run out of Forest Elbow there, got a good slipstream down the Conrod Straight and was able to get him even before the braking zone into the chase, which was good. It put me into second position and I thought I'm just going to focus on, you know, putting in some good lap times there, maybe trying to peg back first place. But going back to the penalties, I understand why they're doing it. They're saying I could have done more to avoid the accident. I didn't do that, therefore I get a 1 second penalty. But yeah, real racing, that's the sort of thing that happens. You see opportunities like that and you've got to take them. I stuck to the outside, I gave him plenty of racing space. He turned in on me, so he absolutely should have got a penalty there for sure. But I'm just not entirely convinced that I earned that 1 second penalty. Anyway, I'm not going to drag on too much about penalties. Obviously, they're working on them. They're updating them all the time. They're doing some good things with them, and there are still some things that need to be fixed. That one's a little bit, the jury's out on that one. The reason I say that is because it kind of actively discourages you to not overtake. Now, it's a racing game, and racing in general, the idea is to try and get to first. If you're not first, the way to do that is by overtaking people. And I think little 1 second penalties like that have a tendency to discourage you and discourage people from doing overtakes. Now, was that one a little bit too dangerous? Was that a bit too ambitious? I don't know, maybe. Some of the best overtakes, some of the most memorable overtakes you'll see in real life are often the ones where they're opportunistic and they will start on the outside of a turn and they'll try and, you know, go side by side. Now, maybe that's just a fantasy and in Gran Turismo land that my expectations are too high and I shouldn't be expecting that that's the kind of racing I'll get. But anyway, it is what it is. It's in the bank now. I've got 1 second. I wasn't too stressed about winding that down because a little trick, and you'll see me do it. I don't think I do it this lap, but you will see the way that I actually let that, when it's only 1 second, it's not so bad, but if you've got a long race and it's a few more seconds, you can wind it down bit by bit at this section that we're at right now, just as you go around the right-hander down Conrod Straight there. If you actually back off just before you turn, you've pretty much already hit maximum speed and you can roll your way completely off the throttle down to the turn, and you seem to soak up around about half a second of penalties just by doing that. in the lap, and you don't actually lose that much time. You might lose a few tenths, but ultimately you're not losing that much time. So that's the best way I've found at Bathurst to actually wind the time down. And when you've got a small penalty, you can kind of do it over the course of the race. So I wasn't too concerned. I thought I'll get that before the end of the race. But I guess the main thing for now is obviously I'm in second position. I've built up a little bit of a gap there. And in terms of fuel strategy, I wasn't trying to save fuel at all. I did that a little bit last night. I have mixed results with that. And I think with a big horsepower track like Bathurst, where you've got mountain straight and this whole section I'm coming up now, this is all maximum power. This is where you want to be on your fuel strategy 1, or your fuel burn set to 1. You want to give it maximum power, because if you don't, you'll get eaten up. You'll get easily overtaken. Slipstream's strong enough in this game as it is. You don't really need to affect that and adversely disadvantage yourself by not doing that. So over the top of the mountain here, yes, you probably could knock it down a couple of settings, especially once you get to the top just here and on your way down towards Forest Elbow. You can definitely wind the fuel back a little bit if you want. And I didn't do that. You can also just short shift through this section at all. But anyway, enough about fuel strategy. Mine in this particular race was just going absolutely balls to the wall and giving it everything. Now, everything kind of went okay at this point. I did the race obviously last night, so I knew that I used around about 3/4 of a tank of fuel to get me halfway through the race. So one stop, giving 3/4 of a tank of fuel. But the other thing I did last night was run out of fuel, so I was probably a little bit more paranoid than I would normally be about running out of fuel. So I wanted to make sure that in my stop I put plenty of fuel in, or at least enough fuel, and that meant going over the diamond. Now, I've always sort of trusted that little diamond that it gives you on the fuel refill bar when you're in the pits. I've always trusted that. I've always stopped it right on it, but again, probably just coming off running out of fuel for the very first time. I've never done it before, and if, by the way, you didn't see that stream, you need to fast forward to about 3/4 of the way through my previous stream, which was on the 17th of May, which was last night. Three-quarters of the way through, you'll get the Bathurst race. You'll see what I did. I pushed it a little bit too far, and anyway, it didn't go well. Then I tried to roll into the pit lane. I wasn't actually aware that the car was still drivable when it ran out of fuel, I guess, because I haven't run out of fuel in Gran Turismo before, and I'm used to other games like Assetto Corsa or R-Factor or what have you. When you run out of fuel, that's it. The engine cuts out. There is no more power. There's, you're done. So that's kind of what I thought was going to happen here. I tried to roll into the pit lane. I carried a lot of momentum to make sure I got to the animation where it actually grabs the car, and obviously you don't drive it through the pit lane. The game does that for you. I thought if I can get to that point, it should drag me through to the pits. And I came in a little bit too hot, ran off and hit the wall on the pit entry. It's not the greatest place to do it, but that's because I was trying to hold too much momentum than I really should have been. Looking back now, obviously I know you can drive the car. In fact, it'll let you speed up to around about 80 kilometers an hour when you've got no fuel in your car at all. So knowing that, if I had my chance again, I'd have rolled into the pits. I'd have slowed down, make sure I got through the tight twisty section of the pit entry of Bathurst, and then I would have sat on 80 to get me into the actual animation where it takes over your car. And I probably would have lost some time, but only really a few tenths, maybe. Worst case scenario, a second and a half. So that's what I should do, and if you are in the same situation, then that's what you should do. I didn't. Anyway, it was a complete disaster. I tried to drive over the pit entry over the grass section, and anyway, I don't want to keep going on about that, but go and check it out if you haven't already. This time round, it's the end of lap 4 here, so this is when I wanted to pit. It's when the leader pitted as well. Now, this is kind of where things go a little bit worse for me. I got the pit entry fine, so last night carried too much momentum, hit that tyre wall out to the side there. But you'll see where the diamond is. It's only about 3/4 of the way up, which matches what I was saying before, that it takes about 3/4 of a tank, at least in this car, in the Corvette. It takes that much fuel to get you through about half race distance. But being just a little bit paranoid and wanting to make sure I had plenty of fuel, especially if I was going to drive really, really hard, I did go a little bit over the diamond, as you can see. Not a hell of a lot, but just enough. But it didn't go well for me at all, because I actually dropped back behind people that were in front of me. In fact, I think at this point I've dropped 2 positions back behind Hyper LS here. I think he was 3rd behind me, but he was 2.5 seconds back. So at this point I wasn't sure if he'd short fueled to try and get track position, because it can be difficult to overtake. So I wasn't sure if he did that or the car might be a little bit better on fuel burn. Whatever the story may be, I came out behind him, so I've lost position in the pits, which is straight away not ideal. I was actually hoping to try and gain on the leader a little bit more, and I lost a lot of ground and a position. But the risky thing is with any racing is when you go into the pits, certainly when you're the first people into the pits, you're going to get some cars that haven't pitted yet. They'll go in the next lap, for example. And that was the case up here with Itchy. And you can see he went up the inside there. I tried to follow him through because he'd gone out. He turned back in on me, which upset the rear end of the car and speared me into the wall. So if I have a quick look at the replay here on third person, you can see that Hyper went up the inside, pushed him out wide. I actually thought I was going to be able to follow him through the inside, and we made a little bit of contact, but then he turned back into me again, which you can see better from this replay. He was pushed out wide. I thought I'd be able to sneak up the inside. The first contact I'd have got away with, but when he turned back in and tagged the tail of the car, it spat it out, and obviously I went into the wall. So not ideal. That gives you a better picture of what happened there. Now, I didn't get a penalty for that, which I'm okay with, because I kind of feel, again, like he should have allowed some racing room. If that was real-life racing, for sure, I think he'd have got the penalty there because he didn't allow racing room. I'd gone up the inside, I had track position. He should have left at least one car width of room on the inside of the track. Therefore, we'd have both got through the incident. He'd already been pushed wide, but I know there are plenty of you that are going to watch this video and say, no, that's all on you. You shouldn't have stuck your nose up there. You should have let him tuck back in. And obviously, hindsight's always 20/20. Looking back now, yeah, maybe I should have backed off, but reading the situation on the fly at full race pace, I thought he'd been pushed out a little bit wide. I thought I'll sneak up the inside, stick hard to the left-hand side of the track up against the wall, and if he was still on the outside of me when we're going down through the S's, that's the point I would have backed off and let him go through. Obviously, I misread that. It ended up with me face first into the wall and having a spin. So at this point, I think everyone has pitted. You can see I've come out of the wash there in 5th place. So pretty disastrous little couple of laps for me. 2 laps, in fact. I lost time in the pit stop. I lost a position in the pit stop. I got involved with traffic that was going to pit anyway, which is another thing for me. If I know I'm about to pit and I know I'm at the end of my tyre life and fuel burn, and one of the faster guys who I've only overtaken because of pit stops, they've pitted and I haven't. Again, for me as a racer, I would allow a lot more racing space. I'm not going to fight them back. That's not who I'm fighting. That guy was probably down in 7th or 8th or something like that, maybe even lower down the order before I went into the pits. So he's not racing me. I'm obviously up in 2nd place. He'd be racing the other guys around him. So it would actually be quicker for him when you've got really fast traffic on fresh tyres, having just pitted, and they're the leaders anyway. Personally, I would just sort of get out of the way. I'd let them go past. I'm not racing them, and I'd try and do it in a way that was the most efficient. I'd have stayed out wide, left racing space, but anyway, that's how I do it. I know there are people in the comments that are going to say, no, you just shouldn't have stuck your nose up there where it didn't belong, but it is what it is. As I say, misread the situation. The race didn't quite go how I planned. I really hoped I'd at least hold 2nd, and there were little moments where I was catching 1st place, so it would have been good to chase him down. Now, obviously, I had a little bit of anger about me at this point because what was looking like a fairly strong result. Plus, if nothing else, I could have at least raced Hyper. Now, it does look like Hyper actually lost out as well, so potentially I might have dropped 2 positions there and it would have been the fight for 3rd instead of 4th. Pit stop strategy didn't go my way on that occasion, or I misread it, or what have you. Anyway, in 5th position here, there wasn't a lot I could do except push as hard as I possibly could on the faint hope that the guys in front of me were perhaps conserving fuel, you know, having not filled up as much. They were on a fuel saving strategy. So I was at the advantageous position of having good tyres, good fuel, and you can see there, that was actually my fastest lap of the race, I believe, at 2:04.3. I pushed very, very hard. That's not too far off my qualifying time, and that's in race conditions. With more fuel on board and a little bit of wear on the tyres as well. So the first lap went well, but with 2 laps to go, you can see there's a fair old gap in between myself. I had a good gap back to 6th, which was always good. It's a lot harder to be competitive and push hard and not make mistakes when you've got someone hounding you. So what I was trying to do was put time pressure, because sometimes you don't necessarily need to be right up the arse of the person in front of you. If he's watching his gap to the left-hand side of the screen there, watching that gap come down, and I'm taking half-second chunks off him every lap or sector or whatever the case may be. If he's watching that, that can sometimes be enough pressure that they start to feel it. They're like, geez, this guy's coming, he's got a heap of pace on. I really need to start focusing on my lap times because I can't cruise through to a 4th position there. But as you can see, pushing very hard on the second last lap, I did make another little mistake, ran out a bit wide, caught the grass on the right-hand side at McPhillamy Park, which just unsettled the rear, slapped me into the wall. Having said that, it was a fairly good lap until that point, and I actually didn't lose a lot of time. I think as we come through Forest Elbow here, down towards the 3rd sector, as I go through the 3rd sector, I think I've only lost something like 0.3 of a second. So to have a fairly big wall slap up the top of the mountain and come out of it with only a 0.3 of a second deficit is actually not too bad. I was relatively happy with that. But anyways, I chase on. I'm suddenly becoming slightly aware that I'm pushing too hard, but you know, little things like that. He ran off, he cut the corner there. Not sure why he didn't get a penalty, if I'm being honest with you, but he slowed right down, and I was able to just duck up the inside. Perhaps because he slowed down and gave up a position in the game, didn't give him a penalty. I don't know what happened, and I don't look behind me here to see if one was eventually applied. But I was able to, and again, was that because I was gaining on him, the gap was coming down, he felt the pressure a little bit, made a mistake that he perhaps otherwise wouldn't have? I don't know, but that's why you should always push, regardless of what position you're in, even if you should be fighting for 1st and you're back fighting for 5th and 4th. Keep pushing anyway, because, yeah, perhaps that might not have been unrelated, he might not have seen me coming, but, you know, I'd like to think that time pressure where he sees me coming was enough to just kind of make him push a little bit harder than he would have liked. Now, straight away at that turn, you'll see it didn't go particularly well. The tyre wear, it's not bad, but it's at that point that you can no longer push as hard as you would on, say, a qualifying lap when there's no tyre wear on. This is the first sort of wear point of the tyres where you should ideally be backing off. You shouldn't be pushing as hard. And I tried. I was still trying to just pump out the quickest lap times in the faint hope that anything could happen. I don't know why. It's the last lap. I probably should have just backed off. And you can see I actually ran well wide there out onto the gravel at McPhillamy Park. It was not a good thing. I was pushing too hard. The tyres just screamed and cried no more. I got a load of understeer, and the rest is history. Now, that allowed 5th place to catch right up to me, and he was starting to hound me, so then I had to be sort of conscious of getting these corner exits right. And obviously coming into Conrod Straight, there's a load of slipstream up for offer. The game slipstream is quite strong anyway. I suspect that in the daily modes it's actually set to high rather than real. When I do online lobbies, I set the slipstream strength to real. I suspect it's actually high because you can get some cracking slipstreams in this. But I pushed hard, sort of went out wide, took something of a defensive line, tried to keep an eye on my radar. He didn't quite get close enough. So the most important thing now is just to get good corner exit, not so much the corner entry. It's always a balancing game. You try and defend the best you can. But here I was just solely focused on getting a strong corner exit. And perhaps gave up a little bit of corner entry spare, but it was enough to cross the line in 4th position. But anyway, it wasn't the perfect race. Arguably I should have come 2nd. I didn't. Things didn't go my way, but anyway, that's the race I felt I owed you. Hopefully you did enjoy it. Thank you very much for watching. Remember to hit like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye for now.